Peace, peace, peace. It's your brother Tavon Swano, aka the Orthodox Sport, and I am pleased to bring to you Elder Remy Ilona from the Igbo tribe um, to have a nice dialogue about Igbo genetics, culture, religion, um, history, and a very interesting topic about a concept of African Anusim, etc. And this is based upon uh, a ruling that came down within the last couple of years from a group called a Beit Din called the Obadiah Alliance, which ruled that the Igbo people are Anusim, meaning that they are descendants of Jews that were converted to other religions, etc. Um, and so, being that a lot of African Americans are descendants of a very similar genetic group and people, etc., I thought this would be a very interesting conversation to have in terms of people who are also trying to reconnect themselves to a Hebrew culture, being that they lost it through the transatlantic slave trade. So, just as a quick background to myself, um, my mother descends from North African Jews by way of Spain and Mexico, who are also considered Anusim, who were forced to convert to Catholicism, etc. And my father descends; he's African American, as I was saying earlier, and his people lost their history and were forced to convert to other religions and whatnot. And like many other people in North America, in the United States, um, uh, the largest chunk of my sub-Saharan African ancestry is Nigerian. And for many of us, when we look take a 23andMe, etc., it's going to tell us that we're connected to the Igbo or the Yoruba people, etc. For me in particular, I have 28% ancestry that goes to the Igbo and Yoruba based upon my 23andMe. And so many people are looking upon what was going on with that Obadiah Alliance ruling and finding out, oh, okay, the Igbo people are being deemed Anusim based upon genetics and culture and practices and religion, etc. And maybe this can apply to me. Um, and so a lot of people are wanting to understand um, more about the Igbo culture and more about the people they potentially connect to, etc. And so I'm pleased that Elder Remy alone has come to have this conversation with us. And so with that, please give whatever background you'd like to give to yourself, because I couldn't do it justice. And I will start with the questions whenever you're done giving whatever intro you want to give to yourself.
Okay, you want to start with the questions before I introduce myself, or you want me to introduce myself before you dive into the questions?
I would, if you don't mind, whatever introduction you'd like to give to yourself, so people can have more of a background and understanding of who you are, and then we can get into the questions or whatnot.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to the show. That's the first thing I want to do, to thank you for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Igbo people. I am Remy Ilona, as you described me. In my country, Nigeria, I was an attorney. I came to the United States 8 years ago, where I have been involved in studying and teaching subjects related to Igbos, Jews, Israelites, Hebrews, Semites, general history, anthropology, and the other issues you mentioned. I'm an author of actually 20 books, and I'm working on one right now which promises to shake up everything that everybody is familiar with. I'm an advocate and an activist of the group Omenana Defenders, which is the Igbo group that stands where the Jewish agency stands in the Jewish community. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. And so I think the first set of questions I'm going to ask is going to be based on genetics, because that was one of the places that the Obadiah Alliance placed importance in terms of declaring a Jewish ancestry for the Igbo people. And this is something that a lot of African Americans are finding to be intriguing as well, because when they take a lot of people who take a DNA test that are African American, they're finding out that, oh wow, I have genetics that go to East African. Some people are finding out they have genetics that also go to the Middle East as well. And I think this is something that you're pointing to in a few yearbooks.
Thank you. I will get into the question by, but first I want to make some observations, because I see what you are doing and what we are trying to do as very important. So I want to use the opportunity to also set something straight. I do not agree that the Igbos are Anusim. If what I understand Anusim to mean is what it actually means, Anusim would mean descendants of Jews that are, say, lost. That's not my way of looking at the Igbos. I look at the Igbos as the linear descendants of the biblical Israelites, the largest Israelite community in the world today. The Israelite community, you would find the culture of the biblical Israelites in their culture, exclusively the Igbo. That would be my definition of who the Igbos are. And the Igbos are actually not a tribe. We are a nation. In fact, a nation that was sovereign and independent until Britain put it down about 200 years ago. A nation of many Hebrew republics, numbering, even with all the tragedies that has befallen it, or that have befallen it, over 50 million people. We are not counting the members of the nation that have been cut off. So we are not a tribe. Then we are not descendants of Jews. Jews are a branch of Israel, as Igbos are. Jews are not one of our identities. Our identity is Hebrew or Israelite, which I understand it also to be an identity of Jews. I mean the two identities, Hebrew or Israelite, because if you say we are descendants of Jews, that's not a proper identity for us. That done, I have worked on genetics as much as I feel is important, because I am stressing this particular area because the Igbos have a saying that if you are carrying an elephant on your head, you shouldn't really be bothered about crickets. You shouldn't really be bothered about crickets that your food is mashing. What I have found in culture has been overwhelming. So I simply needed genetic information to beef up or to support what culture has shown. And my findings, I have managed to put some down in writing. I will tell you what genetics shows, and then I will tell you why I even went into genetics in the first place. The book you are looking at now, the cover of this book, the front cover of this book, if you are, I believe you are seeing what I'm showing you.
Yes, sir. We can see it clearly.
Okay. My Heritage Incorporated studied my DNA. I paid for the test. They studied my DNA, sent a map detailing my genetic journeys. And I used that map to design the front cover of this book. What they discovered in my genes, or what they saw my genes to be saying, is that I was in the Middle East, where you find Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, that my genes are found in those areas. My genes that are close to mine, or genes that are identical to mine, are in those areas. Then my heritage also found that genes that are identical to my genes are found in the country called Nigeria. And then the genes that are also identical to my genes are also found in East Africa. This cleared a particular issue for me. The issue it cleared for me was that it helped me to understand it helped me to confirm my journeys. It helped me to confirm my journeys as a human being. Humanity, or modern humans, started in a place in East Africa. Before I went into genetic analysis, I had read that these humans went up north, went into other parts of the continent called Africa, went up north, then some turned back into Africa. So my genetics, as found by My Heritage Incorporated, simply showed that my own trajectory was from East Africa up to the Levant, that is the Iraq, Iran, Israel. Then it swung back and started moving back down to West Africa. It confirmed what my studies of culture and history had always made clear, that the Igbo people, we are part of the people who separated from other humans in Uru of the Chaldeans. Remember, originally, all humans were one. There were no cultural demarcations. The ancestors of modern humans we found in East Africa were just humans. They were not divided into nations. They were not divided into separate cultures. It was much later that people began to be separated by culture. So my own ancestors belonged to that family that separated from others in a place called Uru of the Chaldeans. Of course, I'm referring to the figure called Abraham. He separated from his own branch of humanity, his family, began to develop a separate culture, and then moved to the place we know as Israel. And we are all familiar with the experiences of the Israelites, various invasions, various wars, exile this place, Then ultimately I ended up in the place called Nigeria. And the findings of My Heritage again confirm this history. There are 50 million people still identifiable as Igbos today. What my result was showing is that people that share genes with me are found in the territory called Nigeria today. That a lot of people that share genes with me are found in the territory presently called Nigeria. It makes sense. It's very, very easy to understand. Majority, or I would think that 99% of every Igbo alive in the world today took off from Igbo land. How does this relate to African Americans using DNA to discover their roots? Remember that a lot of African Americans were Igbos. The Igbo land was the epicenter of the slave trade, of the slave raids rather. It was raided more for slaves than any other part of Africa. More raids for slaves occurred in Igbo land. There were more Igbo victims than any other single ethnic group. So it's not surprising that a lot of African American DNA matches Igbo DNA. It's simply genetics confirming history again. Because before we began to use genetics to try to beef up history, regular history had already told us that a lot of African Americans, Caribbeans, took off from the Igbos because Igbo land was the epicenter of the raids. more people, I repeat, more people were taken away from Igbo land than from any other single ethnic group in Africa. I think I'll yield here for now as far as DNA is concerned. As far as the question you asked is concerned, unless you want to still get me to say some more things in relation to the question you posed.
So just for clarification's sake, you're saying that one, you don't necessarily accept the concept of Igbos being Anusim, and that there's a broken tradition, etc. And I definitely respect that concept. But to the question about genetics or whatnot, if I understand you correctly, you're saying the significance of your DNA to the Israelite world and other Israelite populations around the world, it shows that there's a migration that of Hebrews that went to West Africa by way of East Africa, or the Middle East and East Africa, etc. That went to West Africa, and that there's other populations around you that share those genetics, and that African Americans are also going to share those genetics, being that some of those genetics being that a large portion of African Americans were taken from Igbo land to the Americas in the slave trade. Do I have that correct?
Essentially, but I will still need to clarify some things. Yeah,
Yes,
you
sir.
got it very right on the question of Anusim, because when somebody says that the Igbo people are Anusim, it ignores that there are some Igbo people who are still in the Israelite religion. I'm very specific about the Israelite religion. There is an Israelite religion which still lives, that religion that Moses practiced. Where you are going to find that religion in the world, the only place where you are going to find more traditions of that religion in the world is among the Igbo population. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world today. So if there are people who are still living exactly the way Moses lived, it does not accord with the reality, with the true reality, to say that they are Anusim. Anusim, if what I understand Anusim to mean is what it is, it would mean people who were converted out of their own way of life. Of course, I can prove to you with facts and figures right now that what I'm saying is based on facts by giving you some examples of those traditions in the religion of Moses that Igbos still practice. I mean, Igbos that are still alive in 2023. And so I do not see how a people that are this close to their most ancient traditions would be people that are simply in a blanket way described as people disconnected from their religion and culture. That's why I said Igbos don't fit that term, Anusim. Then my own research is telling me that my own genetic research is telling me that the Igbos came down to Igbo land by way from Israel through North Africa to present Nigeria. What I understand the East Africa there to be saying is that there was also a remnant of people, that there are also a remnant of ancient peoples that also lived. Remember, history tells us that ancestors of human beings took off from a place between Ethiopia and Kenya. I think that what my DNA is talking about by showing a concentration there is that, of course, in some ways, I share genes with those remnants of ancient humans. Their DNA would match my own too. So what I think my heritage found is a history of humanity, and in my own case, starting off at East Africa, moving towards the Levant, where, of course, a lot of man developed a lot of culture in the Levant. I'm not saying that the Levant was the only place that man developed culture, but I'm saying it's one of the earliest places that man developed culture. You have ancient Egypt there, you have Mesopotamia, you have Sumeria, you have so on and so forth. So in my own case, my journey, and the journey of so many other Igbos I have studied, their genetic reports is we started off as part of those earliest modern humans, moved up towards the Levant. Then Levant is Iraq, Israel, Egypt, then swung back through the desert to what we know as West Africa now, because the term West Africa was not even an ancient term, just like the term African. I hope I've been clear.
Yes, sir, you have. And as a matter of fact, I'm part of a couple of freelance scholarship groups, and one of them deals with genetics and whatnot, and trying to talk about the very conversation we're talking about. And so one thing that we deal with is that there's multiple studies that talk about amongst all modern Jewish populations, even that have a starting date that go back like 3,400 years before present, it's shown that they have a 3 to 5% autosomal sub-Saharan African set of DNA that is consistent amongst people in Kenya, amongst the Luya tribe, and also amongst people in Nigeria, like the Yoruba, just as a base population. They didn't test everybody in both spots, but they can see that there's autosomes, just like you're talking about, that from sub-Saharan Africa that went into the Middle East and whatnot, and are part of the basal population or the founding population of Israelites, etc. And so it's also, again, we can see this genetic connection through East Africa and West Africa. And we can also see it in other genetics or in other studies to where there is a Levantine infusion of DNA into West Africa 4,000 years before present, etc. So there's many West African tribes that have that have migration stories and practices that are Hebraic. And I agree with you that amongst the Igbo, and specifically in Nigeria, you're going to see probably the most amount of Abrahamic traditions and biblical practices in one spot. You might see a few here and there in other tribes and whatnot, but you're probably going to see the most there. But the consistent concept being that they have a migration pattern to where they're coming in from east to west and whatnot, and sometimes from north to south, like you're saying, from North Africa. Whatnot. They've come in from the Levant to North Africa to West Africa, etc. Is that what you find in your research?
If I got you clear,
mm-hmm.
If I got you clear, I'll try to recap what you said. You are of the view that a lot of genetic testing has shown that there are a lot of overlaps genetically between groups. Am I right?
Yes. So there's studies that show, for instance, that in modern Jewish populations, when going back far into their genetics, they have ancient autosomes that 3 to 5% of them, of their autosomes, represent a sub-Saharan population, sub-Saharan African population that was in the Levant at the founding of the Israelite nation, like for instance during the Exodus, etc. And also there's testing that is shown, and there's papers that show that there was an infusion of Levantine DNA also going back into West Africa around 4,000 years before present.
Okay, yeah, this makes sense to me, because I told you at the very earlier stage of our conversation that I have my views about the contributions of DNA to history. I believe we can only use it to affirm culture and history. I think that people are reading a lot of things about genetics wrongly, and using it where it should not even be used. For example, I do not believe that somebody can use DNA studies alone to determine who descended from any group that left history thousands of years ago. I believe that an African American or a Caribbean can use DNA alone to know that they are Igbo. Because we still have Igbos in the world today. But I do not believe that somebody can use DNA alone, DNA studies alone, to say I descended from the ancient Egyptians. Because in the first instance, if you find a cadaver, a skeleton of an ancient Egyptian, are you going to say the ancient Egyptians were not mixed with other people? Everybody has always been mixing. So what I'm trying to say is, looking at your explanation very, very well, it's not surprising to me the overlaps that you mentioned, because remember, these territories are contiguous. Sub-Saharan Africa, Levant, and the Jewish populations, say, north of that Levant you are talking about, these territories are contiguous. People have been moving up and down, mixing throughout centuries. In fact, one of the surprising things I find in my work as a scholar is that historians don't seem to recognize that there is no gap between sub-Saharan Africans and North Africans and Middle Easterners. No gap. A lot of the kingdoms that exist, a lot of the empires that existed in sub-Saharan Africa extended into North Africa, and some extended into West Africa. And people were simply moving to and fro. So why are people surprised now to find Levantine DNA that are Levantine in sub-Saharan Africa, when all these places were like one country? In Nigeria, there is a place called Kanem Boronu. The rulers came from the territory that present Libya constitutes. Present Libya. The Shehu of Boronu, he came from Libya. Okay. Old Songhai Empire was brought down by a man called Judah Pasha. He came from Morocco. He came from what we would call Old Morocco, because we didn't hear of Morocco in ancient times. But Morocco has been in history for at least it's been in history since post-medieval times. Those guys came from Morocco and fought in Songhai. So why would people be so surprised that genes of people in both locations match, and also match with genes of people further north? In other words, I'm saying that your explanation is something I find reasonable. It's something I also expect to be so.
Yeah, that leads me to my next question about the haplogroups, etc. Because the scholarship group I deal with, we talk about the autosomes, but we also talk about haplogroups in terms of being able to follow haplogroups through migration and whatnot. And so, what a lot of people, a lot of what we deal with when we talk about connecting to our Hebrew roots in West Africa is a lot of people try to tell us, well, no, Hebrews didn't go to West Africa, or your DNA says that you're just West African and that you don't have any ties to anywhere else but West Africa. And so something that we like to point out is the fact that, for instance, like amongst the Igbo, the majority of the haplogroups amongst the Igbo males are E1B1A 7, E1B1A 8, etc., whatnot, and those are haplogroup E is something that you find in the Middle East, something that you find in the Levant, etc., whatnot. Something that we touch on all the time is that amongst the Natufians, which is we consider to be like a proto-Semite population, or like they were a precursor to the Semitic populations in the Middle East. They're upwards of 10 to 15,000 years ago, etc. We find that they are predominantly either E1B1A or something called EP2, E1B1B or EP2. EP2 is a precursor to either it splits into either E1B1A, which the majority of Igbo have, or it splits into E1B1B, something you find very largely in North Africa, the Middle East, and etc., like you're talking about, right? And so to that end, one of my questions here is, have you taken a test? Like MyHeritage is an autosomal DNA test. They don't test for haplogroups. Have you taken a DNA test that actually tests for haplogroups? And if so, are you comfortable sharing what your haplogroups are with us?
No, I have not gotten involved in genetic studies up to that extent because I really knew what I wanted. I wanted to confirm that Igbo genes match genes in the Levant, and I concentrated on my cultural studies.
Okay. For sake of time, I'm going to move forward, but I would love to invite you to have a conversation with the scholarship group I'm talking about that deals with genetics, specifically to deal with the migration patterns of the haplogroups amongst the Igbos that literally show and prove out that match the migration, or that match the areas where your autosomes light up in the MyHeritage DNA test that you took. Because what we see is that, for instance, the majority of the people in our group that carry E1B1A, we find that it's commonplace along the Sahel route from East Africa to West Africa, going I believe the Sahel even touches parts of northern Nigeria, whatnot, but going from the Senegal to all the way to through Mali, all the way to East Africa, etc. We find a lot of their haplogroups match that kind of a migration, whatnot. We also see that amongst the Igbo and the Yoruba, etc., that they also have haplogroups that match that very same migration pattern, etc. So if you're interested, we'd love to have a conversation with you about that in greater detail when you have more time.
Okay. By then, I may have read up more about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So last couple of questions on genetics. Do you believe that Igbos as Israelites and Hebrews, that they are genetically connected to other Israelite populations around the world that claim to be Jewish, etc., like Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Ethiopian Jews, Jews in India, etc.?
My answer will be tailored. My answer will be tailored exactly to what I can prove. As I told you, I have concentrated largely on cultural studies, but I veered into DNA studies in order to simply confirm, to see if the much vaunted DNA studies will either differ with what my culture and history says or support it. And when I looked at my result and looked at the results of other Igbos that had their DNA tested, and it shows that our genes, our DNA are found in the Levant, to us the case was closed. But some of us still insisted that we should look at the bigger picture. I was tempted, so I looked at that I gave that a look too, and I saw through what is called get match that I think get match goes into deeper comparisons, goes into deeper studies than just the peripheral issues. And what we found there is that I have matches in places like Ukraine and Latvia. I do not know what that will be saying, since I'm not an expert on genetics. And remember, I've said in passing that I'm not one of those that are trying to place genetics in front as the way to trace history. Because I do, from the little that I think I know, as a scholar who is also observing things, because it's not only geneticists that have a voice on this matter. I am not one of those that are trying to push genetics to the forefront as a way of tracing history. I think it should be at the very last, for the simple reason that our common sense tells us that every group of humans has been mixed from origin, from inception. So we can never be completely sure that this group is exclusively this group, since groups have always mixed. So knowing that this is a limitation of genes and genetic studies, I have not given it I have not attached the importance that some people seem to be attaching to it. I have relied more on culture because I know that Israelite culture, I can prove it in any way, I can prove in any case that Israelite culture is different from every other culture that existed in the Levant. And I can also prove that Igbo culture is completely different from every other culture in Nigeria. I didn't say just different, I said completely different. But I can't make the same claims about genetics because I know that, for example, Esau and Jacob were siblings, twins. They have different cultures, but their genes will be similar. So I did not give genetics that important. I'm not looking at genetic studies the way a lot of people are looking at it, that once they can master what the labs are bringing out, then they can say this is this, this is that. I don't subscribe to that. I believe that genetics can help people to know where their ancestors came from, especially if people that are related to their ancestors are still with us today. For example, if your genes show that you are related to the Igbo, this can bring us very, very closer to a reality, because you are looking at Igbos today. But once we begin to talk about people that existed thousands of years ago, I believe there are severe limitations that we must recognize in order not to help to share information that is not completely accurate.
Okay, I'm intrigued to get into the cultural questions myself. So my last question on DNA is actually going to go into a cultural concept. So being that, for instance, like when you're born in as an Igbo, you're not gonna be given a DNA test off right away. That's not the culture. How do Igbos trace descendancy through the culture? Is it maternally? Is it paternally? Is it something else?
Through the father.
Okay.
Paternally, yeah. My son is Igbo because I'm Igbo. If his mother is something else, he's 100% Igbo. And that was the way Israelite ancestry was traced in the past.
Mm-hmm. So this gets into the to the Igbo cultural questions, and I'm very intrigued to hear about this. So please take as much time as you'd like to answer these questions here. What cultural tie? This is again a 3-part question, and we can split up as however you like. What cultural ties do the Igbo people share with the other Israelite populations and other Hebrew populations of the world, other African tribes that surround them, etc., and with other diaspora descendants of the transatlantic slave trade here in the Americas, etc.?
I have done a lot of survey of Semitic, Hebrew, Israelite, Jewish, Beta Israel cultures. Note, I'm very, very deliberate with my use of language. Semitic, Hebrew, Israelite, Jewish, Beta Israel. I have also done a lot of work on cultures of other Levantine peoples, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. I'm pretty familiar with what they did. The Greeks, the Romans, very, very much familiar with what they do. And I know the culture of Africa very well. I am not going to say that Igbo culture of today is identical. Note, I'm using the word identical. I'm not going to say that Igbo culture of today is identical in every respect with other Israelite cultures. But if you look at them, you would see they have the same roots. I will give you an example. If an Igbo takes his life today, 2023, 19th February, if an Igbo steps into a forest, hangs himself in Igbo land, the Igbos will not bury him. The Igbos will not give him a burial because he has offended God, offended the community, committed an abomination. The Jewish community will also not bury him where they bury others in their cemeteries. The Beta Israel in Ethiopia would not do the same. They will bury that person outside the community. Note, there is a little distinction now. While the Igbos will, in older times, they would throw the body into the forest. But I understand that the Jews will not give the person a burial in the regular places that Jews are buried. But they will still treat the body as the body of somebody who has violated the norms of the community. So if you look at these three traditions I compared, you would see they have a common root. We cannot say the same thing about non-Igbo African culture. While the Igbo culture views suicide as something that should not even be contemplated, let alone be done, there are times in Yoruba culture where it is desirable for one to take his life. So, I don't know if you need more examples of convergences and divergences. What I'm trying to say is that the Igbo culture is uniquely Igbo culture in its location. It's not similar to cultures in its location. It stands on its own. It is simply the Igbo culture. I'm not saying that it's superior to any other culture, but it's simply uniquely itself. It's not similar to the cultures of the neighboring groups, but cross the locations, go to the places you find other communities that history says they came from Israel. You begin to see similarities. This is completely verifiable.
So out of the multitude of books you've written on the topic, what are some of the, I have a link in the description for your books on Amazon, etc. For anyone who's interested, what books would be the best to go through in terms of identifying the aspects of Igbo culture that are linked to Hebraic culture?
The Hebrew Igbo republics will not only, it will do more than what you asked for. It will lead you right into the Hebrew Bible, where you will begin to weep and cry, because you would find yourself in the company of the people you have been reading about since you were born. You will begin to read about them. You will probably also begin to act like them, because you will be left in no doubt that those people that you read about, that you will still find their descendants in the world today doing exactly what those people did. Speaking exactly the same language those people spoke. When I say language, I don't mean like, or rather using the same words those people used. For example, the ancient Israelite understood the following idiom: to cover one, cover me with your garments. If you want to marry in ancient Israelite, and probably more than ancient Israelite, I'm going to tell you something that you will find very, very, not just intriguing, but eye-opening now. An ancient Israelite and an ancient Moabite, remember, these two peoples were related. We are familiar with their history. At a point, they were one people. Lot was the ancestor of the Moabites, while the Israelites were descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. At a point in biblical history, both of them understood "cover me with your garment" to mean marry me. "3,000 years ago, if a Moabite and an Israelite met, and they actually met, that is why I say get into the Hebrew Igbo republics and you may find yourself beginning to cry. 3,000 years ago, if a Moabite and an Israelite met and they said, let us go to that community where a man is covering a woman with a garment, both of them will understand, the other one will understand what the other one said. And the Igbo term in 2023 for marriage is cover with the garment. The Igbo term. If you take a flight from your city in the US, get to Nigeria, go to Igbo land, go to my community, say that Remy asked you to come here because there is a ceremony of covering with the garment, Ima or Godo. They will take you to where a marriage is taking place, where an Igbo marriage is taking place. Then I will tell you, I will give you the biblical parallel now. When Ruth asked Boaz to marry her, what language did she use? He said, cover me with your garment. My son is having a shower. Is the noise interfering?
Not at all.
Good.
Not at all.
When Ruth wanted Boaz to marry her, she simply said, cover me with your garment. Uchiem with ogodoge. Mabama akwa. And Boaz the Israelite understood what Ruth was saying. And I am telling you that the Igbo word, the Igbo phrase, the Igbo idiom for marriage is cover me with your garment. And the Igbos have used this in the Igbo language throughout their history until I excavated it and put it down here.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I recommend people definitely pick up that book, and even a couple other ones, because the brother has written extensively in terms of the practices and the cultural ties that you're going to find biblically, etc. And I have to agree. I've been able to maybe look across all of Africa or sub-Saharan Africa and put all of those traditions together, and maybe picking from here and there, etc. But it seems like the Igbo culture is the only singular culture I've been able to see, and particularly through the helps of the writings of Brother Remy Ilona here, that how in depth and how intricate and how many boxes get checked off. The amount, it's literally eye opening.
If you will permit me to, would you permit me to support what you said to sort of support what you said?
Yes, sir. You can say whatever you like, Elder.
Good. My comment now would have come where you mentioned anti-Semitism and racism, where you mentioned anti-Semitism. But let me get into that, even though we will still get to that at the right time. Why did I get involved in? I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why I even spent the time and resources to use genetics. Professor Walter Isaac is an African-American rabbi and a professor. He was at Savannah University before he got into University of Tennessee now. He said that he wrote that Igbos suffer anti-Semitism and racism, suffer from anti-Semitism and racism. When you mentioned what Igbo culture says about Israelite culture, I felt that I have to make this comment that I'm making now. There are traditions of the Israelites that only the Igbos can talk about today. Nobody else in the world can talk about them. But the Igbos have been denied more than any other group. People have derived joy from sitting down in their offices and say that the people that can actually tell us what Moses was saying are not Israelites. So many things that Moses understood, it's only the Igbos that can understand them in today's world. But this is the group that has been denied more than any other group. So when you say that you have found Igbo culture demonstrating more Israelitishness than any other culture, we did it to prove a point. Oh, you want to say that we are not Israelites? We are now going to show you that we possess Israelite culture more than you. And that's why you are seeing what you are seeing. And we are not seeing anything yet. More is going to come out. More is going to come out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because there's even aspects of what I'm learning in terms of studying what traditions came off the slave ships in America that confirm what you're saying, that there's going to be more to learn.
Let me interrupt you for a moment.
Yes, sir.
A friend interviewed one of my friends recently, and he was trying to insinuate that some Jews may have converted some Igbos, and left some Jewish culture with them. Nothing to be wronger. We are talking about Israelite culture. I'm talking about Israelite culture. I'm not talking about Jewish culture. I'm telling you that Israelite culture, as far as you are talking about Israelite culture or Hebrew culture, the key is to understanding them lie more with Igbos than with any other group. So how can you say that somebody came and taught them when only they know some of those things? How can you teach what you don't remember? For example, I illustrated with one phrase in Genesis, because remember, language is part of culture. Language is part of culture. We would leave the Israelites now and move even back to the Semites who produced the Israelites. We will move beyond the Hebrews and move to the Semites who produced the Hebrews and look at their culture, and you will see very clearly that it is the Igbos that understood what the Semites were talking about. The writers of the book of Genesis, they tell us that Haran died in the face of the father. Haran was the brother of Abraham. I looked at all the translations of the Torah in this world. No commentator understood what that phrase meant. But the Igbos know what it means. If you can read Hebrew, go to the Hebrew. What the Hebrew is telling you is Haran died in the face of the father. What does it mean? It's completely meaningless to everybody outside the Igbo community, because only the Igbos retained the culture, use that idiom. And they retained it not because they're superior. They are not superior, but their conditions of dispersal from Israel enable them to retain more ancient traditions than any other person. What the idiom is telling you is that if somebody predeceases, if a first son dies before the father, dies while the father is still alive, he loses the right of the first son. But this same group was the same group that has been denied more than anybody in the world. A few years ago, I'm sure you heard about the show of shame. Some groups in America here went to Nigeria, collected some specimen from Nigerians, came to America, and after they called a press conference and said that they discovered that Igbo DNA is only sub-Saharan. That it shows that Igbos are not related to the Israelites. How did they come about their conclusion? They said they compared those samples with the DNA, with the samples of some Jews. So if they don't match, to them it means that Igbos are not related to the Israelites. But note, they didn't compare the samples with the DNA, with the samples of the Israelites. They compared them to the samples of some Jews. So look at that. And it entered the press. The press began to share this false information. Began to share it. They began to share this false information. After all, at the end of the day, what matters is getting out information, even if it is false. Not many people in the world are rigorous enough to search for the true information. And you know what I began to see? Some people who have the title professor began to cite this false information. So I yield for now.
Something that I'm finding very interesting and learning in terms of some practices amongst people that came off the slave ships is how they were very adherent to harvest festivals in ways that were very seemingly very biblical, etc. What can you tell us about the harvest festivals amongst the Igbo peoples? I'm sorry, this is a freestyle question just off the top of my head. I didn't send this to you beforehand, but what you were saying made me think about this.
I got the last part of it, but for me to get the full picture is very good. Can you repeat it again, please? And yeah, if you can raise your voice, that would be good.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Something that I've been studying recently for the past couple of years are Israelite practices that came off the slave ships in the Americas and whatnot. And something that I found is that there was groups of people that were very adherent to harvest festivals, etc., in a very biblical kind of way. And I was wondering what you could tell me about the harvest festivals amongst the Igbo and how they match to the biblical festivals.
Okay. In that case, I do not know how familiar you are with the New Yam Festival. It is the most prominent, the most subscribed to, where when the Igbos will harvest the yams, and nobody will touch the yam until God has been given the yam. And a festive meal is prepared. The oldest man says a prayer. The community eats. He says a prayer, thanks God for the successful harvest, and God eats the yam through the people. The officiating priest, who is usually the oldest man outside the Levitical communities of the Igbos, goes away with the rest of the yam. But the people eat the yam communally. After them, people can begin to eat. This is the first fruit offerings in the Bible. But among the Igbos, it took the name New Yam Festival because yam became the most important food item to us in West Africa. Of course, there are other harvest festivals like Edenga. This one is done in respect of another crop called cocoyam. Cocoyam is not as popular as the one built around yam. There are so many others, but all are minor, or there are a few others, but all are minor compared to the New Yam Festival. That is the first fruit offerings. So I wouldn't be surprised if they came aboard the slave ships, because they remain, in spite of all the assaults by the colonial religion, they became a part of everyday life among the Igbo. Even when people no longer understand everything about it, it survived. So I'm not surprised. I won't be surprised if it survived the rigors of the slave ships and the plantations.
Yeah, there's something else about the plantations that I wanted to ask you about. In certain literature I've been able to find, I've read about different people wearing different fezzes, etc., whatnot. And so, if people can see the background picture of us talking here, you're wearing a red hat. What's the significance of that red hat in Igbo culture? And
You know,
is it called the fez in Igbo culture as well, or no?
no, we call it meme. What I heard from the elders is that I'm going to bring my knowledge of religion now and fuse it with what the elders told me. You know, the Hebrew Bible, in which God also spoke to us, God also spoke to us in the Hebrew Bible about the Messianic times. That if you can make the world a better place, you will have a very sweet and good world. But I don't think that people generally understand what God was telling us through prophets like Isaiah. God was telling us that it's up to you to make the world a better place. And you have all the time in the world to make it a better place. What I'm trying to say is that, 1 second, please.
Yeah, so once again, family, if you are interested in any of the literature from Elder Remy Ilona, you can go to the description below, and you can click the link there, and you can go straight to all of his books on Amazon. Okay, you have the floor again, sir.
Okay, I'm back. So what God was also trying to tell us was, this is what you do. This is what you do. It's up to us to sometimes find ways of doing those things. God made it clear to us that human life is very, very important. Human life is extremely important. Human life is so valuable that you must do everything possible to preserve life. Of course, thou shalt not murder is one of the commandments. Thou shalt not commit murder. I do not know if you know about the Nazirite tradition in the Igbo culture, the Nazirites. You may be familiar with it in the Israelite culture, and that's in the biblical culture, but it survived up till 2023 in the Igbo culture. In older times, the times we are trying to get the Igbos back to, every Igbo that crossed the age of 20, we have to become a Nazirite. We call them Nze. The Igbo word Nze or Eze. Every Igbo is encouraged to become a Nazirite. In other words, every Igbo is encouraged to start living very righteously, to start living a particularly holy life. If you go to the book of the book that carries the story of Judges, I think it's the book of the Judges that talks about people like Samson. He was a Nazirite. He was supposed to shun particular foods. He was supposed to be a holy man. So Igbos are encouraged to get to that level of holiness. They are encouraged to get to the level of the high priest, of the Israelite high priest in holiness. My grandmother was a Nazirite. And one of the measures these people adopt, one of the measures Igbos adopted to help them to maintain that holiness is they have to wear red on top of their head so that all the time they will be conscious. Remember blood. You know the relationship between blood and life. Do you remember the connections between blood and life? If they wear blood, the color of blood all the time, they will be conscious of never doing anything that will take the life of anybody. And interestingly, the Igbos believe that with your mouth you can kill. Our friends from the Jewish community are surprised when we are surprised when they learn this, because they believe, they have a parallel belief that with the mouth you can commit murder. So the purpose of that red is to keep the Igbo 25 hours, 24 hours on watch, to be very careful, to maintain holiness. That's the purpose of that. That's the purpose. Not to stray, not to do anything that will involve the termination of the life of another person. Seems a very, very simple thing to think about, but it's not so simple. People have used their mouth to kill other people, to say things that led to the death of others.
Thank you very much for that explanation. That was wonderful. Very wonderful.
I guess you will be giving me the questions because I'm seeing some questions and I will be happy to field them.
Yes, sir. We have a question in the chat. The question is, in Igbo culture, when a young woman has given birth, do they get separated? And if yes, how long?
She slides into Omugo. If a woman gives birth, automatically she becomes secluded because she enters into a state called in on Anso, which the word Anso, compare it to the word Nasa. Exactly the same way in the Hebrew language, she slides into that state for 3 months. This is still done up to 2022. If an Igbo man in America, if the wife delivers, the mother has to come from Nigeria to come, because in that state she is like a woman having her menstrual flow. She cannot cook. She is not dirty, but she is in a state. Nso is in a state very close to. Okay, let me search for the perfect example. Menstrual state, that is one. A woman that has delivered is very close to a woman having her menstrual flow. Then you know that the Israelite high priest cannot touch the body of the dead. And even the regular Israelite cannot touch the body of the dead. Not because the dead is dirty, but there is need for a separation. So the Igbo woman having her menstrual flow is in that state. If somebody touches a coffin, the person's hand has to be purified in the Igbo tradition. So the Igbo woman that delivered a baby is in that state. So she must be secluded and for 3 months. Omugwo. The term for that is omugwo. Omugwo. I need to even come in with Igbo. I will tell you why it's necessary for me to come in with Igbo terms like omugwo. If you enter the streets today, you may even find some Igbos who will tell you that Igbos did not come from the Israelites. We did not find them about 20 years ago, but we are beginning today. Why? People don't outgrow the societies they live in. Some people have made it their careers to deny that the Igbos came from Israel. Some of them are in academia. Some of them are in the media. Igbos read these things, and due to our colonial experience, our culture is not taught in schools. The religion that the Europeans used to colonize us did not teach us these things. These Igbos attend these churches that teach that Igbos, that don't teach that Igbos came from Israel. These Igbos read these newspapers that lie that Igbos did not come from Israel. Igbos study under these professors that will not recognize the word of Igbo. Yet, they offer opinions about history of Igbo. So, what do you expect some Igbos to tell you? But if these Igbos that are becoming victims of these people, when they listen to these our exchanges and see me talking about Omugwo, and you relating it to an Israelite practice, they should retrace their steps. Because this matter is not just a matter of entertainment. The Igbo society is in crisis today because it needs to be reconnected to its Israelite roots. Without that reconnection, it cannot get up. It cannot get out. It cannot get up from the crisis it's existing in today.
That leads me to my next question. Now we're getting into religious aspects of certain things and whatnot. And so I wanted to put this one on the screen for people to see. What is Omenana, and how should people understand that in terms of the religion of the Igbos, etc.?
Omenana was the religion that Moses practiced. And Omenana was what Moses called it. Omenana was the religion that Joshua practiced. And Omenana was what Joshua called it. Omenana was what David practiced. And Omenana was the name that David called it. Isaiah practiced Omenana. And if you wake up Isaiah today and ask him, what was your religion? Isaiah, Omenana. Omenana means religion and culture you shall do in the land. Pick up the book of Deuteronomy. Go to Deuteronomy 6:1. Don't come to me because maybe you may think that I'm mistranslating. But find those Igbos that say that will even tell you that Igbos did not come from Israel. Tell them to translate Deuteronomy 6:1 for you. To translate it to Igbo. What will come out of their mouths is Menana. It means religion, culture you shall do in the land. The English religion is not Omenana. It's not a religion you shall do in the land. The Roman religion is not religion you shall do in the land. Islam is not a religion you shall do in the land. The Yoruba religion is not religion you shall do in the land. The Hausa religion is not religion you shall do in the land. Only the Israelite religion is religion you shall do in the land. You want any more information about this?
Which of your books would you consider to be most comprehensive on that one particular topic there?
I have a book that I spent all the time in the world only tracing the history of Omenana as the Israelite religion. I started from Abraham in this case and terminated it at Isaiah the prophet. Igbo religion and culture.
So again, family, there is a link in the description to all of Remy's books on Amazon, and that book is definitely amongst them. Going forward, I'm going to put this one on the screen as well. What is the Igbo perspective of God?
Ama amasi amasi. The being that is known but cannot be fully known. Ama amasi amasi is one of his titles among the Igbos. Chiukwu, that is great God. Chiukwu means great God. Chineke means God the creator. And interestingly, I read a book, I can still locate it now, The Real Name of God. Rabbi Wayne Dosik, PhD. I made sure to buy it. This guy made a convincing argument that the real name of God, that the real unpronounceable name, the name he found is very close to this Igbo word for God, Chi. And people that have followed Japanese and Chinese languages are talking about energy, meaning Si or Chi in both languages. And this rabbi who talked about this real name of God came up with, if you are familiar with the Shema, Ano Chi, Ano Chi. Remove the A and O, you have Chi. The Igbo word for God is Chi. When I came across this, it meshed. This rabbi was saying that it came from a mixture of Egyptian and ancient Hebrew. Ano, Chi. He found that he examined that Ano, Chi. You find in the Shema prayer. So, but I've given you what Igbos think, what Igbos perceive. Amasi, he that is known but cannot be fully known. Chi Ukwu, great God. Chineke, God that creates. In the Igbo names for him, you have an idea of what the Igbos think about him. The being on high whose clothes cover the ground, and no image. No image. Even the colonialists who had a purpose, who had a mission, whom it was in their interest to call us an uncivilized, pagan people, they still noted that no images. No images. The Igbos had a distinct recognition of a supreme being who had no images. Even though the colonial missionaries would like to call all Africans pagans and heathens.
So on that note, this is a freestyle question because what you said just made me think of something. So how would you define the Igbo perspective of God in the sense to where is it monotheistic? Is it henotheistic? Is it something else?
Again, what I would say would still be a challenge, would come in the form of a challenge. There is no word for God with a small g, for deity with a small g, for deities with a small d, for gods with a small d. The Igbo language lacks these words. And what does language do? Language tells how you see the world. Yeah, language tells us how you see the world. If the Igbo language does not have a word for God with a small g, for deity with a small d, it shows that in its raw form, it's a monotheistic religion. The Israelite religion, which the Igbo religion tells you about it more than any other living tradition, is a monotheistic religion as well. The Israelites had a knowledge of other gods, but what did they regard the other gods as? Nonsense. Things like Baal. They were called gods in the Bible because the writers of the Bible are using a language. They are using a language. I say it for the fourth time. They are using the English language and other languages that they have to use to convey a message to us. So they would call things like Baal gods. But then what did they understand those things to mean? They told you that they have eyes they don't see, they have feet they don't climb, and you find such sentiments in the Igbo worldview. The Igbos are the only people that will born what some of them began to call gods. Even those Igbos that say that Igbos, I'm concentrating on the Igbos because it's the Igbos, is when an Igbo doubts that the Igbos came from Israelite. That's what bothers me, not when a non-Igbo says they don't. Because what it means is that some Igbos are being fooled. Okay, even those Igbos that have joined those that are skeptical because they want the Igbo society to continue to be where it is in the doldrums, they will not deny that Igbos born gods, born things that others, that they have been programmed to see as gods. Igbos born them. Igbos believe that if I'll say it in Igbo, because some of these skeptics may not even get the full point if I do not use the Igbo language. Igbos say, alose akalia ike, agwa ya osisi eji wee pie. So some Igbos think that alose means gods now, and the Igbos are saying to that they are God. If you become too arrogant, we tell you the wood used to carve you. Can you imagine anybody in this world who is not, who does, how many people can have these gods to talk to their gods like this? Only the Igbo. And interestingly, we have people writing about this 70 years ago. So if somebody doesn't even feel like believing what Remy is saying, I can point him to a book written 60 years ago where a community brought an idol and burnt it. And you will find much that is helpful by comparing the Igbo culture to the surrounding cultures. If you cannot respect your idol, your God, how would you treat kings? Igbos did not even have them. But around them in Nigeria, all their neighbors, or most of their neighbors, have kings who were also gods.
So would your book on Igbo religion and culture also be the best book in terms of being most comprehensive to understand whatever you have to say in terms of the Igbo perspective of God?
Hebrew Igbo republics and the Igbos and Israel, an intercultural study of the largest Israelite diaspora or largest Jewish diaspora. These two books.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Next question. And this is something that I believe I heard you mention before. So if I haven't worded this properly, please forgive me. But this is a fascinating concept to me. It's something I think a lot of people who connect to Israelite culture miss in terms of what's actually in the scripture and whatnot. Can you speak to the concept of the Israelite nation as a messianic figure?
I can talk about that subject because I have authored a book because, of course, I come from a community that people are not compelled to listen to. I'm sure that people have not paid attention, but if they pay attention, it will be best for us. Broken Paradise. I write about things that are verifiable. 200 years ago, when the European missionaries and colonial officials began to come into Igbo land, they noticed a society that was surreal, sublime, pristine in culture. Of course, it did not have the high-rise buildings you find in Manhattan. We didn't have them, but we had no prostitution. We had no destitutes. And interestingly, we had beaten our swords into plowshares. That was the first place it happened in this world. And what was Isaiah talking about? What was Isaiah? What was Isaiah's message in Isaiah 2? The lion and the sheep shall lie down together. None shall hurt each other. But more importantly, no prostitution, no destitutes, no prisons. It occurred to me that mankind had temporarily lost a chance to experience Messianic times. So I began to write it down with hope that one day, everybody that descended from the Israelites will abandon whatever baggage they have, will abandon whatever prejudice they have. Those with resources will call us all together. We will sit down and bring whatever we have. Then Igbos can tell the others how they produced Messianic times in this world. There was peace without a police, without an army. Of course, it didn't last forever because the factors used to build it were neglected. Righteousness, that's all. The people kept themselves holy. But then you need information. Like I was telling you about my grandmother, she was a Nazirite. She was holy. She was righteous. But who will bail the cat? That is why sometimes my voice rises, because this group that has so much to give us is this group that is denied more than others. Is the group that is denied in the Israelite heritage, is denied more than others when they possess information that will heal everybody. So their loss is everybody's loss.
I find that so fascinating because, again, as I look for Hebrew traditions coming off the slave ship, something that I find amongst the Gullah Geechee culture is, again, these are people who are intermixed of 27 different tribes, etc. But something that popped through that held strong was this concept of a praise house, to where it was separate from the church house, and it's where they conducted a lot of councils and all those kind of things, etc. If there was something wrong that was done, and amongst them there was no need for the police. they said that they only dealt with the police when somebody from the outside communities came in because they would do something violent, that there was no issues to ever need police, that they would bring people to the council, and then they would use what was called the just law, to where they would use the Bible to establish whatever was going to happen to the people, etc., whatever needed to be done in terms of making amends for whatever was done wrong, etc. And if the person would not make amends, they would be left outside of the community, etc.
That is Igbo. They took that one up from Omenana. Society was kept healthy without instruments of violence. In fact, those that inadvertently take the life of other people, we are not killed. They ran away for 7 years, specifically the way God instructed us in the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers. When I look at the world today, I have a lot of respect for a lot of countries in the world, but they don't have the full information. There is room for continuous improvement. And that is why I appreciate the efforts of people like you who want to get out information. Because people die because of ignorance. People deny that Igbos came from Israel because they are ignorant. Anti-Semites and racists they are not bad people, they are simply ignorant. They are simply ignorant. They deny what will help them.
Real quick, there's someone in the chat who has a quick question. He says, does he believe Igbo descendants are Israelites even if they do not practice Judaism?
What the Igbos must practice is Omenana. And if they are not practicing Omenana, they are simply renegade Israelites. They are Israelites. They are already Israelites. Nothing can take that away from them. Judaism came out of Omenana. Moses practiced Omenana. Judaism is a development from Omenana. And you can't, an Igbo cannot stop being an Israelite, but he can be a bad Israelite. Of course, we know some bad Israelites in the Bible. Was it not Israelites that made the golden calf? The prophets of Baal were Israelites. They were not, there were foreigners among them, but majority were Israelites. Korah was an Israelite. King Jeroboam was Israelite. Yeah.
All right, going forward with the questions. So this has to do with the previous question about the Messianic figure, etc. The nation being a Messianic figure. Can you speak to the Igbo republics that you believe reflect this Messianic ideal? I thought this was a fascinating concept. And again, I don't think so. When I study West Africa in terms, like when I found the practices coming off the slave ship, I wanted to find out what were their origins in West Africa. And once I went to what was going on in West Africa, I was blown away to how Hebrew of a culture I could actually see going on in certain parts of West Africa. It literally blew my mind. And so I hear a lot of what you're saying in terms of like the older cultures and the older ways, and modern cultures not so much, and we need to restore some of the older stuff. What are some of these older Igbo republics, etc., that you write about, and how did they reflect this Messianic culture that you're talking about?
I'm having a good time. Why am I having a good time? Your questions are opening up my mind, because good research is never done by one single individual. If we must be honest, that again shows us that for the world to get better, there must be a linkage of hands. Your questions are opening my mind more about this Messianism. And in connection to nationhood. What do we know about kingdoms and empires? These are essentially organizations of oppression. Wherever you find a king, you must have people of lower class. Empires are worse, because what empires do is that they destroy nations and sit on them. One nation destroys other nations and sit on them. And the Igbo society, being a Messianic society, is the opposite of this. No kings, everybody is equal. Everybody is equal. Because I kept on stressing no prisons, no destitutes, no prostitutes. How did it even come about? It came about because the society was egalitarian. We had no kings. When the colonialists approached the Igbos, they saw kings in Yoruba land. I'm talking of semi-divine kings, kings that were also gods. They saw them among the Fulani, they saw them among the Hausa, they saw them Ashanti, they saw them everywhere. They did not see them among Igbos. They said, "Where are your kings?" The Igbos said, "We are led by our elders and our priests." The priest does not have power to kill. He can only try to convince you. So, in direct response to the question about the Igbo republics and the Messianic ideal, I am saying that the entire Igbo culture is Messianic. Because if it is practiced, if there is an attempt to practice it, it will bring us to that world that Isaiah was telling us about. And I'm going ahead to tell us that when it was practiced, I know why. I know when the Igbo stopped practicing it well. I know. When there was more effort to practice it, that was the time that we had a society that had no destitutes, no prostitutes. When there were destitutes in Europe, in spite of the Industrial Revolution and in spite of what it took from the world through the slave trade, of course, you don't even want to talk about the Arab world. There were destitutes everywhere. In spite of their involvement in the trans-Saharan slave trade, they had money, but it wasn't going round. In the Igbo case, they conquered nobody, they had no kings, but they had no destitutes because the society was Messianic. Because of why? The culture it was living by was that culture that Moses gave us. I wrote this morning on my timeline that when a lot of people read the Old Testament, they think it's a story about ancient things that are gone. No, it is a story about the future. It is a story that tells you what to do in the future. And I'm saying this with authority because I have seen a society that tried to live by it. Not only that I've seen, but I've tried, I have also experienced it. The Igbos possess the largest business incubator platform in the world today. An oppressed African people who have suffered 2 genocides within 100 years. Sadly, we have racism in the world. Nobody cuts the black man any slack. Nobody believes the black man can do anything. Even when the black man has proved himself over and over again, people still want to believe they are not achievers. But Igbos produce the world's largest incubator platform and oppressed people in Nigeria. And the tradition that produced this business incubator platform, go to Deuteronomy, you'll find it. Deuteronomy says, when your brother a Hebrew becomes poor and comes to you, you shall accommodate him for 6 years. On the 7th year, you shall let him go, well provisioned. This is what produced the world largest business incubator platform. I knew because I had written about it. But 99% of the Igbos did not know that what gave them those their millionaires are something in Omenana that is also in the Hebrew Bible, which they are using. So what happens is an Igbo orphan or somebody whose parents are don't have money will go to the house of an uncle with money who is a businessman or a trader, serve him for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, he gives him money, opens a store for him, he takes off. In Nigeria, where we have the Yorubas and the Hausas, you wanted to know the convergences between Igbo and the cultures of the others. By tradition, if a Yoruba serves a Yoruba, the person that is learning the trade pays the person that is teaching him. But in the Igbo case, the person that is learning is the person that is giving money. In other words, you teach me something and you still pay me for teaching me. So what am I saying? The culture, the Messiah will not drop from heaven or from the mountain. The Messianic times will come when we keep the traditions, the laws, the morals in the Torah. But we have to know how to do it. And it's in Omenana that we will find how to do them.
Again, wonderful, fantastic answer. Definitely appreciate that. I'm going to switch gears onto another book that you wrote that I thought was fascinating concept. When I saw this, it kind of just my jaw dropped a little bit. And it was a book having to do with the concept of Igbo-Americans, etc. Do you by chance have that one on your desk there with you, or no?
Igbo-Americans or African American history. Is it this?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, I examined the two. I examined the Igbo Americans called African Americans. And then I examined the Igbo Americans that are still Nigerians. Because I wanted to start a conversation between the two groups. I wanted both groups to start a conversation. Because if they could unite, they have so much to give to this wonderful country that has given me a base, a platform for some years. I mentioned the strengths of the African American community, which, by the way, most African Americans don't know they have. Out of something bitter comes something good. Slavery was abominable. You guys passed through the kind of suffering that no human being should go through. When I was writing my book on African American history, it was a journey of tears. It was a journey of tears. I didn't know that people could go through that kind of suffering and live. Because it didn't. It lasted for a long time. But you learned how to be a community from that experience. And Africa has not challenged people enough to bond together. But out of that hell you descended into, because of that hell you descended into, you learned how to become a community. And that's why you've been able to build the things you built. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yes, sir.
You are the 11th largest economy in the world, which means that if the community produces a unique type of leadership, they can take charge of Africa and put it right. So the purpose of writing that book was to redirect Igbos to their brothers in the African American community so that they can learn from them. And there are also, of course, things African Americans will learn from the Igbos because you need religion to keep culture alive. I'm very happy that I'm now seeing people like you, people like William Brown, people like Dunni Sani Washington, people like Rav Mordecai becoming, Amare Stoudemire, my friend, becoming interested in Omenana. Because with Omenana, what you have achieved, you will be better positioned to protect it. Because without religion, culture dies. Without religion, be sure that culture will die. So what these Igbos that are still called Nigerians will give you are fragments of the culture, because most Igbos don't know most of these things I'm telling you due to our colonial experience. But they still do some of them mechanically. For example, they will know about Omugo because their wives will pass through it, but they may not know why they are doing it. And this is applicable to even there are communities that have not gone through the kind of trauma the Igbos have gone through, but you still find members of such communities having people that don't know anything about their religion and culture. How much more a community that was attacked, that its religion was specifically attacked and replacement theology. That's what the missionaries did to the Igbos. They brought in Christianity, took Omenana, threw it away, but we said no. Without our culture, we are gone. And we started the great revival movement that we are engaged with right now.
So, two-part question. What are the issues that you see that face Igbo-Americans when trying to form communities? And to that end as well, what solutions do you propose for Igbo-Americans trying to form communities?
African Americans who are Igbos have already crossed the Rubicon. You guys have already mastered the art of community formation. You guys may not know some of the things I'm saying here because sometimes you need an outsider you need an outsider to act as your mirror. I have attended African American weddings in Texas. I've met African Americans. I'm using the term African American when I should be, because I'm looking at two streams of Igbo Americans, those that are still Nigerians and those that are African Americans. That's why I'm using the term African American. So why still talking about those I call African Americans? They are already masters at building communities. So all we have to do is to encourage them to keep on doing what they are doing. But those that are still Nigerians, they have been unable to build communities in America because Omenana is no longer the first thing they view or they accept. It's no longer what tells them everything they should do about life. It's no longer the regulator of their worldview. They are Christians. So if an Igbo is a Baptist and another one is a Methodist, there is already something between them. They would incline more, the Baptists will incline more to the fellow Baptists who are not Igbo. The Methodists will do the same. The Methodists will do the same vis-a-vis the Methodist that is not Igbo. So this has stopped them from being able to form communities here. While in your own case, even if there are religious differences, what happened in the plantations was traumatic enough that it got seared into your consciousness. But still, it needs to be nourished. It needs to be nourished. If you don't nourish it, with time, even that experience will go. Even the memory of that experience will go, and you'll be back to square one. I don't know if I did justice to the questions.
No, very much so. I'm very much enjoying your answers. Very much so. Next question in this section here. Put up on the screen as well. How should Igbo Americans organize themselves politically, if at all?
They have to, first of all, become a community. I mean, I'm talking about those that are still using the identity Nigerians. They will return to Omenana as culture, gradually return to it as religion, become one people. Then they will be in a position to, they will automatically become a political force. Same thing applies to those that use the identity African Americans. They're already in the mainstream, but they can do more by simply strengthening their communities. If they become stronger, begins to build institutions, more institutions. Automatically, they are already organized politically. These are things that happen naturally. If you do one, two takes care of it, of itself, three takes care of itself, but it will not be imaginable for somebody who has not become for a community that has not become a people, a focused, united people, to be thinking of having political weight. They won't be able to do that because they are not yet an organic people.
Okay. And to that end, and you've already touched on this a little bit, but this also goes into the last part, what you were talking about. Should Igbo Americans forge alliances with other groups of African Anusim? And when I'm talking about African Anusim, I definitely respect what you're talking about Igbo not being Anusim. But to me, I think that African Americans would definitely fit that Anusim definition, being that most of them were cut off from their traditions and whatnot, and are having to literally jump over an ocean to find them.
Okay, yeah. They would, it is right that they should forge alliances with everybody in the world, but ideally, they should forge alliances first with their fellow Igbos, because people tend to work together more amicably if they have things in common. They have a lot in common already with Igbos, even though there are differences. For example, the Igbos that did not get caught up in the transatlantic slave trade don't have that experience. Meanwhile, the Igbo Americans that are African Americans did not experience the tragedy, the genocide in Biafra. These are already two factors that help to forge their cultures. They need to find a way to resolve whatever discrepancies that will arise that will create misunderstandings between them. But if they do not become one first and they jump ahead and begin to look for groups that are further away from them in experience, I don't know how profitable or how valuable such meetings will be. Because at the end of the day, you might find people talking past each other.
Let me modify the question just a little bit. Should Igbo Americans forge alliances with other groups of African Anusim who are trying to establish Omenana as their foundation? Like, so I was saying, for instance, about traditions that we found coming off the slave ships and whatnot. So I've been able to look into these traditions more and more for the past few years, and I've been trying to codify these traditions into one large group so people can understand how thick and full the traditions were coming off the slave ships. However, like I was saying to you, like it seems like it was a very similar community structure to where there was no need for police. There was many cultural or many communal aid societies to where people were helping each other out with whatever they needed when they were sick or for burial or for many things, etc. It looked very different from modern so-called African American culture, whatnot. And so there's groups of people who are now trying to do things like preserve and live out this culture, like you're talking about. So do you believe it will be profitable for Nigerian Americans of Igbo descent and African Americans of Igbo descent who are both trying to preserve Omenana to forge alliances?
Absolutely, it's very, very necessary. Absolutely necessary. If we are staying in Riverside, if there are African Americans, I will meet regularly with them. We will begin to revive whatever we can revive. It's very, very, very important, because otherwise it will be easier when the two of us begin to work together.
Let me just modify my question here because I gotta.
You still think I'm not getting it?
No. My next question, I typed it up, and there was a word that I mistyped, and I'm trying to put it in there for the people to be able to see it as I'm asking the question. No. You answered the question perfectly. It was, and I appreciate you letting me modify the first one. Hold on, just still correcting something real quick. Here we go. So now we're moving into the last couple of questions here, and I definitely appreciate you for the breadth and depth on your answers and whatnot. This is an interesting topic that I wanted to touch on because I found it interesting that you had written a book touching the topic of anti-Semitism, etc. And I wanted to ask this 3-part question here to let you kind of take this wherever you wanted to go with this. Do Igbos face anti-Semitism within the Jewish world as a whole, the Igbo, other African communities within Africa, etc., and within the diaspora of Igbos around the world?
I will start from the very beginning. When somebody that is a descendant of Israelites says that the Igbos are not descendants of the Israelites willfully, when the person does not show any interest to learn, the person simply says the Igbos are not Israelites because the person feels that black people cannot be Israelites, I find it very difficult to convince myself that the person is not anti-Semitic against Igbos. I find it, of course, there is racism there, but also there is anti-Semitism. This is one, so that answers the first part. Of course, Igbos have suffered genocide in Nigeria. 3 million plus Igbos were killed. So Igbos face anti-Semitism in Nigeria. And when the genocide was taking place, less than 2% of Africans stopped it, or rather did anything to even condemn it. How can people stand by and 3 million people are starved to death? This didn't stop. This didn't happen within a month. It happened over 30 months. And nobody stopped it. So, yes, Igbos suffer anti-Semitism from their fellow Nigerians and from Africans. I think there's a third part which you can remind me about. Okay, yeah, I'm looking at them. And within the diaspora around the world, no, I wouldn't say that Igbos around the world would practice anti-Semitism against other Igbos, because those Igbos that will be anti-Semitic against other Igbos are themselves victims of anti-Semitism. So if you are Igbo and you are a Christian, it doesn't mean that Nigerian Christians that are not Igbos will not be anti-Semitic against you. So the those that hate Igbos hate them not because they are practicing Omenana. They hate them not because they are not practicing Christianity or Islam. They hate them because they are Igbo. so yeah, that's the way to look at it. They don't practice they don't experience it from fellow Igbos because every Igbo is a victim. But they experience it. We have experienced unnecessary delegitimization, which I'm finding extremely difficult to rule out as anti-Semitism. It's not been easy for me to say when I find somebody that also says my ancestors were Israelites, when they show no interest in examining Igbo culture and history. We have books on, they know about me at least. What is so difficult about coming to me and asking me questions? I'm very, very open. I'm very receptive. I have the credentials. I have the qualifications. So why not approach me to learn about the Igbos? What they sometimes do is they go to Wikipedia, go to Google, find some worthless information and say, oh, this is what we found about Igbos. Because that is what they want to find. So how am I not going to see those people as anti-Semites? And then, in the case of Africans, of course, there is a lot of bias against Igbos, prejudice. So that answers that question on that score. And on the last, I will reiterate, why would an Igbo be anti-Semitic against a fellow Igbo when that Igbo himself is a victim?
Yeah, I wrote that last part wrong. What I meant to say was Igbos in diaspora around the world experiencing anti-Semitism from the countries within their.
Sure. Yeah, there are Igbos who have also misbehaved, made some of their host communities to mistreat them, but definitely there is a bias. There is a bias. I don't want to mention places in Nigeria, non-Igbo places. Some of the things that are going on there in order not to endanger the Igbos there already. Because when we look at Nigeria, we are essentially not looking at a country like the US. We are looking at a totally different country in structure. In Nigeria, if you are Igbo, your land is Igbo land. If you are Yoruba, your land is Yoruba land. If you are Hausa, your land is Hausa land. I don't expect to have all the rights that a Yoruba will have in Yoruba land. That is the structure of Nigeria. I know it will come as a surprise to Americans where somebody born in Texas can become a California native. No. I'm Igbo. I was born Igbo. That's what I remain in Nigeria. Of course, Igbos living outside Igbo land experience prejudice. And I would have made my point very clear now by mentioning some things that are going on now, but it will also endanger those Igbos that are going through them. So just take it that it exists. And in other countries too. But it's also complicated now because some Igbos have also been doing things that bring hate. But when they were not doing things that brought hate, in the 60s, 70s, when they were just there as development agents, the hate was there too. And remember, when we say that some are misbehaving, it's usually the misbehavior of one person that invites all the problems. So if you know that you are a threatened community, everybody has to be careful in that community. If you know that people are already prejudiced against you, let everybody in that community behave themselves well, in order not to bring down problems for everybody.
That brings you right into my last question on that topic. What should Igbos and other African Anusim do about such anti-Semitism?
I will speak to the Igbo strand because I know that Igbos have experienced anti-Semitism in its most virulent and violent forms, 2 genocides. What I recommend to Igbos is rebuild your communities. We have a homeland that is still Igbo, even though we have not been totally careful in preserving it. We have not respected the land enough, and may God forgive us for that. But I do not see why Igbos should not be where entities like Britain, the United States, Germany, Igbos have the potentials to be there. But it's going to be a long journey for Igbos to rebuild their society, starting from their communities all over the world. When Igbo societies are completely rebuilt, when Igbo communities are completely rebuilt, it will reduce anti-Semitism or even wipe it out. Do you think that these Arab countries that entered into peace treaties with Israel would have done so if Israel is not coming from a position of strength? I don't think so. If it doesn't have a first-rate military, if it doesn't have a solid economy, if it doesn't have people that have managed to get themselves respected in the world, I do not think that the people that entered the peace treaties would have done so. So Igbos have a lot of work to do, and part of that work, Taiwan, are already doing it by setting up this meeting that we've just heard. Thank you.
So this will be my very last question, because you keep speaking on something that I'm very appreciative that you do speak on, and something I appreciate about your work is that you touch on the genocides in Biafra, etc. Not many African Americans know much about that history. A lot of us are too young to know about it, and some of us that are old enough about it to know about it don't know about it still. So can you give us a brief introduction to that history and understanding of Igbo history, please?
There was no Nigeria. There was nothing like Nigeria 120 years ago. The British invented it. And immediately after they invented it, Igbos became the order, both to the British and to those Nigerians. They found Igbos to be odd. And fortunately, people are beginning to speak up. Many of them complained that Igbos wanted to dominate everywhere. A professor who is not an Igbo said that they were complaining about Igbos, but they were saying that Igbos were doing good things. They said that if you employ Igbo laborers, they rise to the top. Okay, is it a bad thing to work hard? It's not a bad thing to work hard. But things took a turn for the ugly. And 3 million Igbos were murdered. And Nigerians are still not admitting that this happened. They are still saying that a war was fought to keep Nigeria warm. Nigeria was not in existence until 1914. And who even made it possible for us to have Nigeria? Igbos. Others did not want a united country. It was an Igbo that is, we are all brothers, we are all Africans, let us live together. A country that was formed in 1914. And it was an Igbo that insisted that it should be one country. Others is on record. Nobody's denying it. Others were saying we don't want to be together. Igbos were saying we are all brothers, let us be one. And by 1966, you began to kill Igbos to keep that country together. There is a story that is not being told. The story is that the people, they didn't like them. They felt that the Igbos were a threat to their ambitions. And they murdered millions of Igbos by starvation. And the world did nothing to stop it. Whoever had power refused to act. Why do I bring it up? We need to learn from history so that it will not happen again. It doesn't make sense to be pretending that it didn't happen. Probably if the world had addressed what happened in Nigeria, what happened to the Igbos, what is happening in Ukraine will not be happening. But the world chose to pretend that nothing happened. And today, we are back to square one in Ukraine because the founder of the academic study of genocides, Raphael Lemkin, a Polish Jew, spent his life fighting for genocides to be eradicated. Because according to him, it is not a crime against an ethnic group or a nation, it is a crime against the whole of humanity. So it should not be tolerated anywhere.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have reached the end of my questions. I greatly appreciate your time, and I greatly appreciate your contributions to the community. And I 100% greatly appreciate your contributions through literature for the community. So once again, if anyone's interested in the mountains of literature that Remy Ilona has written for the people, please check out the link in the description. All his books that are available on Amazon are there. Have fun going through all the information you can glean from those books. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Only to also thank you for the work you are doing. People perish because of lack of knowledge, and people become empowered with knowledge. Whoever contributes in any way to getting knowledge out is our hero. So you are one of our heroes. You have demonstrated that you are studying about the Igbos. And I appreciate that, because I know people that don't think they should study. I know people that don't think they should study. And what they do, because they also want to have an opinion, is that they keep on participating in propagation of lies, and lies don't help us in any way. It doesn't help whoever is lied against. It doesn't help the person that propagates the lies. But the difference is what I've seen in your case. You are actually studying, and that is why you are able to ask these profound questions that you asked, and ultimately the truth will heal us. So thank you.
Again, thank you very much for your time. Where can people get a hold of you on social media?
Essentially on Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook than anything else, but I will also give you my email, though email is not social media. I'm on Twitter as well, and YouTube. I'm very active on YouTube. I make at least one video. I was making 2-3 a week, but now it's reduced to one in a week, 1 in 2 weeks.
So I'll make sure to put your YouTube channel in the description as well. And
thank you.
This interview will be going up on Remy's channel as well. He asked me for the MP4 for this, so you'll definitely be able to. If you missed this here, you'll be able to catch it on his channel.
Okay, so you. Where would you send it, and it will be easy for me to download? Is it my email or where?
I can send it to you wherever's easiest for you. Your email. I can send it to you through Facebook.
Okay.
However you like.
Okay, I will give you my email too.
Okay.
Okay.
So with that, family, I say peace and love, and thank you, Remy.
And may God bless you. Keep on doing what you're doing. It's good.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.